Okay.
All right.
Welcome everybody.
All you should be seeing is
It
an
is
email
5:05
page right now.
Monday, August 12th.
Did that work?
And I'm calling the regular Wausau District Board meeting to order. Ms. Peck, could you perform the roll call?
Sarah Brock, John Kreischer, Pat McKee, Jennifer Paoli, Joanna Reyes, Jane Roosh, Corey Sillers, Lance Trollope,
Here.
Jim Boucher.
Encourage everybody to stand with me to pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It is the mission of the Wausau School District to advance student learning, achievement, and success. With that, I'll move to agenda item number 5. With that, I would like to recognize speakers and students who wish to make public comment. But before we do, just a couple of reminders. The board recognizes the value of public comment on the educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on district matters. Please identify yourself by name
And state and your address. And each statement will be 3 minutes, timed by Ms. Peck. With that, we have one individual. Jeff, please. Or you can have a seat. Make sure it's pressed down so you have a green light there.
Thank you, hello, and thank you all for your service and keeping things running so well that most of the time we don't have to pay any attention to it. We just trust in you. Did everybody hear about those 2 guys who stole a calendar? They each got 6 months. Ha ha. And but crime's no laughing matter, and I'm here, unfortunately, to point a very big accusatory finger and accuse one of you of felony misconduct. And unfortunately, it's in service to covering up another crime, which is disorderly conduct and obstructing an officer by a middle school principal a couple of years ago. And this entire time, I've been trying to get the surveillance footage that shows that this vice principal totally misbehaved, and I didn't do anything wrong. But the school district, Dr. Hiltz, Superintendent Hiltz, and Ms. Peck, your records custodian, is knowingly refusing to perform a ministerial function, which is itself misconduct in public office. Not to mention the open records violations, which are completely obvious. You know, she's like, oh, well, we can't give you that video because, gee whiz, we live in the 18th century and people don't blur video around here. I'm sorry, but as I've said in my petition for a writ of mandamus, the legal document that the board now has in front of you and that most of the audience has, it's simple technology. You guys are just covering up a crime. If you have nothing to hide, for crying out loud, share it, because it's been really hard on my family for people to have assumed that I did something terribly wrong. And why wouldn't you, right? Who's going to stand up to a vice principal? Well, apparently me, I'm proud to. And you guys, perhaps, I mean, and I know that you're aware of this because I looked at your May meeting minutes, and you back then paid $400 to consult with an attorney. And now this response that your attorney has charged you many thousands more, I'm going to assume, it's all it says is nuh-uh, nuh-uh, no way, nuh-uh. There is no legal insight in here worth $1 for any attorney. And if I get a lawyer, which I don't need one because this is so terribly obvious, shame on you, shame on you. This is so terribly obvious but if I do get a lawyer, then you guys will end up paying for it. That's good old Wisconsin open records law. And what's my time anyway? Only halfway? All right. Yeah, I'd invite dialogue. You know, I hope that you can accept an apology from me for, this is now almost 3 years ago, really, overreacting a bit. No, not overreacting, but reacting wrongly, very loudly, doing my best to embarrass the board members of that time for their complicity in this cover-up. Really was not a good time for me, and it's only gotten worse, but I've been handling it better. So here I am, saying, hey, the law is obvious. I'll take questions in the next minute if anyone has a response, if anyone can justify this terrible, terrible misconduct, this obvious cover-up of inappropriate behavior. This is a professional, modern civilization here, and we can hold people accountable. It's the law, and it's communication, and it's accountability that keeps us a free country. So I'd like to see that. Does anyone have a response?
We're not going to respond. We're just listening to you. You're giving a comment.
All right. Yeah,
That's how it works.
Got plenty more to say, but I'll just send you a couple tasteful, brief emails. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, improvement of the consent agenda. Appointments, additional staff, replacement staff, contract increases, separations, resignations, contract decreases, terminations, leaves of absence, retirements, regular session of July 8th, 2024, and the special session of July 29th, 2024, payment of bills, budget status, and investment report, donations to the district as well. We have one donation this month from River City Church. I'm seeking a motion to approve the consent agenda with great gratitude for donations to the district.
So moved.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Old recurring business, Education Operations Committee meeting. We did not have one last month, so we're going to continue to move on to agenda number 8. Elementary Task Force, Roffer's report. Mark would share with the board the progress and the current standing of the Elementary Task Force. And with that, Mark, I think you're in the universe somewhere.
I am in the universe.
There you go.
Thank you very much for having me here again and for allowing me to participate virtually. I swear I'm a real person. I come to the task force meetings, and our next one is coming up in just another week. So I'm here to just give you a quick update. Last I was here, I think it was June, and the board at that time authorized the charge for the task force. We appreciate that. We've since had 2 task force meetings. I've joked to the task force that this is their summer school program. It's a time for them to learn before turning the tables in the fall and suggesting different options for addressing elementary facility needs going forward. The board may recall our schedule is divided into 2 phases. The first phase is the delivery of long-range student enrollment projections. We've done that. We shared those with the task force in the middle of July, and then I believe you have also a copy of those projections. We did very briefly suggested a continued decline in enrollment, although at a less or at a more moderate level than has been the case over the last 10 to 15 years. We've had, as I mentioned, the 2 task force meetings. At those task force meetings, we've gotten acquainted with each other. We've learned what the charge of the task force is, had a chance to ask and answer a lot of questions, and begun to present information about the school district to help the task force, as I've suggested earlier, learn about current conditions and the state of affairs in the district. So in addition to presenting the projections and the current school enrollment, we've worked with staff to present the current capacities and conditions of the existing elementary schools, different options for delivery of 4K enrollment, as that was a variable that the board suggested the task force might be able to adjust. And then as we come up to our August meeting next week, Wednesday, we'll be having staff and the consultant here present educational policy and programming as it relates to facilities and the financial state of the district, including transportation / busing and how that relates to long-range facility planning. At that meeting, we also hope to present to them a copy of a board-endorsed set of criteria. This criteria is, I believe, on your screen right now and was included in your packet. what is it really? It is a suggestion for different standards that the task force may use to develop, evaluate, and ultimately recommend one or two different facility options or recommendations to the board. It's important to have a playing field that the task force can operate under, and it's important to have criteria to be able to compare one option to another. We could have, over the course of the fall, the task force considering, 5 to 10 different options, and to have some objective criteria to compare them to is very important. We'll be using a variety of techniques to do that. A lot of discussion as we get down to narrowing options, certainly some voting and prioritization. But all of that would be compared against these criteria. So as we put this together, we did this with the input of the task force at both of its first meetings as they've learned more, and with reference to different criteria that have been used in other districts successfully for similar efforts. As laid out in front of you, there are 5 suggested criteria. The first criteria, that one you see on screen right now, fiscal responsibility, would, as proposed to you, would be the highest priority and therefore should be reasonably satisfied with any facility option. So in other words, the recommendation needs to understand the fiscal realities of the district and be reasonably constrained by that. The other criteria that you see on the sheet in front of you, and whoever has control can sort of scroll up as needed, are proposed to be equally weighted. And as you review them, you will see that it is probably impossible, if not extremely difficult, for any particular facility option to get a top score on all of the options. There are some aspects that are mutually exclusive, or at least somewhat at odds with one another. So in addition to fiscal responsibility, we have efficient building utilization. That's making sure that our school stock matches our expected enrollment. We have a proposal for maintaining educational opportunities, making sure the programming and services offered by the district remain of high quality. To minimize the impact on students, both in quantity and types of moves that they might experience with different facility options, if in fact consolidation is on the table in particular. And keeping schools in reasonable proximity to students, where they can get to school easy and their families are connected to the school and other services around them. So you see, those are the criteria. You see a description, a paragraph description for each of those criteria. And then what we will be able to produce with these ABCs that you see underneath them are metrics, measurables that we can help the task force evaluate how well, where we can quantify it, how well that option performs against the different criteria. What we would expect to deliver with each of the facility options starting in September is a map that would show different school arrangements that would occur under the facility options, which of the 14 schools may be consolidated and how. And then what I call a dashboard, a collection of this information with statistical information comparing how that option rates against these criteria. Some of this is very objective, some of this is very subjective, and that's where the task force comes into play. It'll be fairly easy to tell how a particular option performs against our enrollment projections, for instance. It'll be a little bit more difficult to evaluate whether close to students is close enough, and whether the amount of moves that are being proposed are appropriate. Are they too many? Are they too little? Are they the right students moving in the right locations? That's where our task force comes into play to offer their opinions as representatives of the community and recommenders to you. I think with that, I'll close my presentation and be available to answer questions on these criteria or where we've gone and where we're going with our process. Thank you.
So opening to questions by the board?
No question. Actually, one question. Will the work that Mark and the task force are doing, or the CISA work, produce the expense summaries for each building today, staffing, operational, et cetera?
The CISA work will do that, but that
okay.
will be presented to the task force.
Okay, wonderful. Mark, I just would say this is impressive what you guys are doing so far and how you're going about it. I am really drawn to the metrics and a lot of the objective assessments that'll go into it. This is really good so far.
Also, not a question, more of a comment, but I've been reading all the summaries that have come out, and I've really enjoyed reading them, especially the parking lot comments from everybody that are coming in on the Post-it notes afterwards. I can tell just from those that people are feeling like they are learning, like they are being heard, and like this matters. So just kudos to you and your team and the whole task force for that.
Thank you. We really, and I know you do too, really appreciate the volunteerism among this group, and I think you'll be impressed by what they come up with as we move through the fall.
Also, a comment, and I know this list isn't meant to be exhaustive of the only things that you'll be looking at, but just a comment under number 3, where you talk about considering standard classroom sizes and suitability for a modern building and encore spaces. I know in the past a couple of things that we've studied and found out are pretty unequal in our schools would be the extent of some schools have air conditioning and some do not, which can make a big difference on education. Some schools have a separate gym and cafeteria, which also makes a big difference on programming and when they can eat and when they can't and how the gym can be utilized. So hopefully in addition to classroom sizes and site, outside site size, you're also considering those two factors. Those have been important things we've talked about in the past.
Thank you very much. Those have also been raised by the task force.
Any other comments by the group? Well, Mark, I would just say thank you for your work. We're looking forward to the summation at the end, and I know a lot of people are working hard on this, so greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
If no other questions, I'm going to seek a motion for recommendation to endorse the established evaluation criteria. Any other questions? If not, do you have a question?
We had one over there.
Okay.
She seconded.
Yeah, we had a second over there. Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, continuing on. Referendum discussion, decision. We're just going to say discussion at this point in time. Josh, the floor is yours.
I don't have a clicker. Okay. Thank you so much. I will be brief. The entire detailed presentation is, of course, posted online for anyone who'd like to look at it. What we're here to talk about tonight is operational referendum and budget considerations. We know that we have a $1.5 million, roughly $1.5 million deficit for the upcoming school year 24-25, and looking at whether operational referendum is necessary, both when and, or if it is necessary, and if so, when. So there's a lot of detail on this slide. What we're going to focus on is really the two graphics. The revenue limit, so the total that the district has for a budget, less the state aid, is our local property tax. And then our total revenue is our membership, so roughly our enrollment, times the per pupil revenue for our total allowable revenue or budget for the year. So as I just mentioned, a portion of that is our enrollment, or what is called our membership, and that's determined on a 3-year rolling average. So you take the last 3 years of enrollment and average it out, and that just shows this graph shows the trend in that over time. So you can see that over the last 10 years, we've lost roughly 500 students. And what this is a showing the difference between our actual per pupil revenue and if that per pupil revenue had kept pace with inflation over the last 15 or so years. And you can see that the funding from the state has not kept pace with inflation. And currently this year, we'd be looking at roughly $2,500 difference per pupil in terms of state funding. So that's money that the district is doing without. And just a little bit more history on state school funding in Wisconsin. You can see that over time, if you look at the graph, we as a state have been above the national average in terms of school funding, and that in the last 10 or 15 years, we've fallen below the average of the nation for school funding. So we're down to about $754 below the national average, and this data is from prior to the last budget cycle, where there were no increases on an annual basis for school district revenue. So that was from 2 and 3 years ago. This last year and then next year, there is a per pupil increase for the school district budget. We touched on membership or enrollment earlier. This is just another piece of that showing the trend. We continue to see more students open enrolling out than students open enrolling in to our district. Some detail on how to calculate the mill rate. Mill rate is the relative tax on $1,000 of equalized value for a property owner. So our mill rate last year was $883. A little bit of mill rate history. You can see that over the last 10 or so years, our mill rate has gone down pretty consistently from a high of $11.46 all the way down to last year it was $8.83. So a little bit of referendum information. What does it look like? We are talking about an operational referendum for our operating budget. And then the other type of referendum is a capital referendum. That is for things like building improvements, new schools, things like that. That's the type of referendum that we passed in 2022. We're talking about an operating referendum that's actually to increase our operating budget as a district. A little bit of operating referendum history from the state. In the last 10 years, there have been 574 operational referendum questions, 77% success rate, so 77% of those have passed. You have the two different types of operating referendum, recurring, non-recurring. And there's been more non-recurring, and they have passed with a slightly higher success rate. You're looking at 78% for non-recurring, 74% for recurring. We'll talk a little bit more about what those two are and the differences in them later in the slideshow. So as a district, our current financial position and kind of a cash flow out about 5 years, we're looking under that fiscal year 25 column and the surplus or deficit budget. You can see that number in red and bracketed, that $1.484 million. So roughly 1.5. That's this year's budget deficit. Next year's projected closer to 2.5. And what that means is that both this year and next year, we are projected to have to use our fund balance or our savings as a district to fund operations. So we have about a $31 million fund balance currently, and we're looking at really eating into that going forward. And what this means is that cash flow in a district throughout the year is fluid. It goes up and down based on when we get our payments from the state. And if we move forward too far, eating into our fund balance, we will have the point where we need to short-term borrow as a district in order to meet our obligations. So 2 or 3 years down the road, we would have that. That's something that this district has historically not had to do. And what this slide really highlights is when we have this discussion that we know that we need funding currently, and we're trying to decide when is the best time to ask for that funding. Talked a little bit about this recurring revenue. It's base building. It goes on in perpetuity if it passes. Non-recurring referendum, that's not permanent revenue. So at some point, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, that referendum will expire. And the district would either have to make a change in what it's doing financially or go back out to referendum and ask the public again. So a little bit about debt defeasance. Debt defeasance is a strategy where we can save taxpayers money in the long term by paying off our debt early. And that's a strategy that we've used both to save taxpayers money and to help manage our mill rate. So what you're looking at here is the tax impact, estimated tax impact of a $3 million operating referendum. So what we have is in blue, that's our aggregated funds, mostly Fund 10 of our levy every year. And then the orange bar is our necessary, our principal and interest on the debt we currently have, what we pay out of Fund 39. The amount in gray is our debt defeasance strategy that we've used. And then what you have up top there in kind of a yellowish color is $3 million annually for the next 5 years of what it would look like from a levy standpoint of what it would look like to have a $3 million operating referendum. So what this shows and what is possible is to have that $3 million operating referendum with no levy increase. So that's what we're projecting here. A little bit of talk about the two options we have for going to vote to the public for referendum are November and April. We are limited by 2 questions a year as a district. That's what we can ask. And this year we can go to referendum in November, and then we could go in April, but there would be no November 2025 option to go to referendum. So a little bit about what we talked about in terms of potential pros and cons of November and April. If we were to go to referendum in November, that money could potentially be used in the current budget that we adopt at the end of October. That would not be an option if we go in April. The soonest we could use the money if we went in April would be for next year. So that's important to think about as we consider the $1.5 million budget deficit that we have for this year. Another thing about November is that it would be a very tight timeline. We'd have to adopt a resolution at our next board meeting, and then the election would be early in November. If we went in April, it may give us more time as a district to do things like consider what does the elementary task force bring forward as a recommendation, and potentially build a more cohesive long-term financial vision for the district. This is just touching on what our legal timelines are, showing that we would have to adopt our resolution and submit the ballot language no later than August 26, 2024. So that's our next meeting. So I know that was a very brief summary of potential referendum options. Are there any questions from the board?
Open it up at this time. You gave a great presentation in our workshop looking at this very specifically. Discussion had taken place at that point in time. We're looking at a question to be given to the community, and we had the choice of going either November or possibly and April, correct? And that's what we discussed.
Correct.
At this point in time, there's a lot of things that we would like to see on the table before we make that decision, which we had discussion about pertaining to the footprint of the elementary level, what cuts would be needed if we were to go to referendum and the referendum did not pass, taking a look at a budget for that, taking a look at what a budget would be if we went to referendum and it did pass, things that we would be able to continue to do. So all of this has been basically discussed in a very thorough fashion. I would, in summary, say that the board had a lot of questions pertaining to this, but we're really looking for more data as we move forward. Did I miss anything?
No, I think generally the general thought is, I think we do a really nice job of running the district from a financial perspective and are very keen on that. I think that the state financial model has put us in a really difficult position where we have to go back to the community to ask them for dollars. And I just think one of the major components that we discuss is there are a lot of moving parts this year, and for us to really get our senses about us and come up with a real strategic plan moving forward would be beneficial for the board, for the district, for the community.
But as we continue to talk about this, and as we're talking right now, and we take a look at the maximum revenue per pupil versus inflation, that plays a very big part in the fact that we don't get the money from the state, about $2,000 worth per student, which puts us in a tough situation.
Mm-hmm. It's millions of dollars a year that we are short.
And then also when we take a look at the ESSER funds that went away, we take a look at a lot of those types of things, we're put into a pretty tough situation, as many districts are around the state, as you have also taken a look at. So as I gave a summary in that, have I missed anything, members?
I don't think you missed anything, Jim, but something that Josh touched on that I think for anybody watching or listening at home, we want to make sure they understand is why it is that we have to have a fund balance. Because I think a lot of people who don't understand school finance might hear, oh, we have a $30 million savings account and not understand why we're not using that. And the reality is because we have to use that to pay our bills from the start of the school year until our first tax payments in December, January. Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less, yes.
I think it's important that people understand that it's not that money is just sitting in a bank account, getting interest. It's being used every year and then rebuilt with our tax payments.
Yes.
And I think what came up earlier was that if we don't carry a healthy fund balance, what's going to happen is we're going to have to borrow. Mm-hmm. And if we borrow, then we're going to have a larger cost based on interest, and that's not a good situation either. So we're taking a look at the fact that we're in need right now. We're in deep need right now so that we don't start hitting the fund balance. But at the same time, we want more information. And we have been told by the administration that we'll have a lot more information if we wait till April. Again, please add in if I'm missing anything from your point of view. Then I'll throw it over to the administration.
I think you summarized it
based
nicely.
on what we've talked about, you're telling we should do what?
I will defer to Mr. Bushman for that.
I think in the current, being fiscally responsible and knowing that we want to get all of those additional variables, that we would push out for discussion until spring, looking at April. And again, just to emphasize, it's not that we don't need it right now, but we just want to be very conscious of the needs that we have as a community, and come back to them at some point in April with even more information to say this is the financial picture and this is the long-range plans that we have as a district.
So we can basically sit with that as we move forward. Okay.
And that, just to follow up on that you're talking about a referendum question in April, but of course our discussion would be continuing between now and then, and community information would have to happen prior to April.
Correct.
As well.
Yep, thank you.
Good addition.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. If I'm not mistaken, I think you're still up, Josh. So I'm just going to throw it back to you.
Yes.
Don't go away too quickly.
No. And Noel's here if you have any Noel Dordson, if you have any specific questions about this. But Essentially, the firm managing our OPEB dollars is changing. We had no voice in this. This is something that's happening statewide, but we are required to approve it as a district. So nothing's changing in terms of anything that's happening within the district or really how the funds are being managed. It's just a record-keeping thing that needs to be approved by the board.
Okay, so at this point in time, I'm seeking a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the new OPEB trustee.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Am I excused now?
You may, but don't go too far. Okay, agenda item 8D, if I'm not mistaken. So summer learning recap. Dr. Phelps and Mrs. Christensen will recap our successful 2024 summer learning program, including enrollment, programming, and goals for the next summer. I throw it over to you.
Thank you for that introduction. Tammy Cummings is not here today. I know she's on the presentation, but you get the Rob and Vicky show to highlight what we did this past summer, which ended 10 days ago today. So our summer learning program was a total of 8 weeks. All right, so let's jump right into it. How did we do just enrollment-wise? Here's a comparison from last year to this year. If you do notice, our percentage of our students who were enrolled in a class did go down by about 3% this year. And the question would always be right away, why is that? And I will say, John Muir Construction. I don't know if you've heard of this. We were not able to utilize John Muir Middle School, and that's actually part of our elementary program because we're talking about these 5th grade elementary students going to middle school. So it's part of our elementary program. They were not able to get into the school this summer, so our enrollment went down by more than 100 students just in that program specifically. We also had a decrease in our high school, if you notice here. And I'd like to just say having less students in a credit recovery program is probably a good thing overall. We will come back to this when we talk about our goals heading into next summer too. One thing I would like to emphasize about this too, this is the amount of students enrolled. This is not the amount of programs. So if you use my youngest son, 7-year-old, he was in the morning program, but he also took a program in the afternoon with academies. He was also in the Hmong enrichment camp weeks 7 and 8 at DC Everest. So many of these students that we're counting up here also took multiple programs that aren't highlighted here. So we had a lot of students in a lot of programs, and that about 30% is a huge number compared to many districts. All right, so we just wanted to remind the board of kind of our core principles. The NVSS, New Vision for Summer School. We just bring these up because this is how we built our presentation today. So we're just going to go through some of these slides, not read word for word what they are, but just highlight some of the things that we saw this summer. So let's get into our programming specifically. These 2 slides highlight what we offer to our elementary kids and then what we offer to our secondary students. One thing that we think it's really important is continuing to look at our program and what we want to bring in as new. So there are some things highlighted as new. They might not be a new program. For example, academies for those 2nd graders. That is something we've offered to our older kids, but we have it now to our 2nd graders. There was a need there. We also have a new program called Get Active, which I will talk a little bit about on the next slide or 2 slides. We also increased with G2M, which Vicki oversees. We looked at our middle schoolers, our current 5th graders, our current 6th graders, and we wanted to increase that to have more access for our 6th graders, and they did not have that in the past. All right, so let's get to that new program and other community-wide partnerships. Our athletic trainers in our school district and other school districts came to us in winter and said, hey, is there anything that we can do in summer? So we worked with these athletic trainers through Bone and Joint and made this new class for 3rd graders through 6th graders, Get Active. We had over 100 students sign up. They all came over to Horace Mann in the afternoons, and you'll never guess what they did. they got active, and they learned about athletic training at the same time. And we look forward to continuing that partnership next year and even building on that. We also have that community enrichment with the Hmong Enrichment Program, which I mentioned before. We had more AmeriCorps workers, which are 17, 18, 19-year-olds, maybe
Up to 25.
up to 25, more than we've ever had. So we had 34 of those students, including my 17-year-old, who enjoyed it. And many community field trips, which Vicki will talk about in a little bit. As we look to, setting up this successful program that we continue, professional development, we have very little time to set this up. So it's important that we do professional development right. One of those ways we did that this year is our ELA and math specialist set together 20 lessons on the Canvas page prior to summer learning, so our teachers could start getting in there and looking at those lessons, even though they were still teaching in their classrooms. Many other ways that we look at professional development in that short time to set it up, including technology, our district nurses, and then continuing that professional development and support throughout the summer is really important for our staff. And this is time before I give it over to Vicki, is I really want to say thank you to our school district and our many departments, because we could not do that without them, including this presentation, which Diana White put some pictures on it and did a lot of stuff with. But that is just a little bit with human resources, and our district departments play such a huge job in setting us up for success.
All right, so thank you for letting us take this time to explain what we've done. So I am just finishing up my first year in this role, so it was a new opportunity for me to look at the program and decide what changes could we make and what could I do differently. This year, we went down to 3 elementary schools, and in the past we had 5. And I am a logistics person, and I thought, well, we have 3 schools and we have 6 weeks. And my big push in my program is to have a similar offering, an opportunity for all of our students, whether they go to G.D. Jones or Riverview or Satine. So I set up a program where we had 2 weeks, a rotation at each school, and then after those 2 weeks, that rotation rotated to the next facility. Every student in our programming had 2 weeks of summer school swimming lessons at Horace Mann with some other programming there. So that was a change where we had certified swimming instructors give lessons to our students. We also added on this year the middle school program. A lot of parents with children entering 6th and 7th grades felt that was too long of a day to keep their child home in the afternoons. So we thought, let's pilot it this year and see what happens. We had a lot of success with that. We took up to 60 students, 45 maintained the entire summer, and they did a few extra field trips that were more age-related for them. So here's some of our community partners that we brought in. To our elementary and middle schools. They had a large variety of it. A lot of them you see during the school year as well, but we like to thank all of those community partners for their time with our students. It was a lot of positive impact, I think, for their learning in the summer and to have that fun. And then our system was set up to offer a lot of field trips for them to go and explore our community. So we had usually 2 days a week. They stayed on site for some programming with our community partners and our AmeriCorps and some of the other staff members, and then they went on a field trip the opposite days. So here's a pretty thorough list of places we got to go to this year.
So it's August 12th, and summer planning starts in September, next month already. So we've already looked at our goals for next summer. One of those goals is to increase that participation so we're above that 30% again. We did not like it dropping below that 30%. We also want to continue, as Vicki mentioned, we have gone to 3 elementary schools. We want to really amp those programs up so that students can stay at those buildings in programs that they're interested in for a full day. I mentioned my son before. He started at Statine, was bused over to G.D. Jones for the afternoon. It would be great if our families could drop off or have their kids bused to one site and they're there all day for this amazing programming.
So we want to continue to utilize amount of our community field trips, options for the G2M, and expand on that. Like, what other opportunities could we come up with that our students can't afford to go to with their families or don't have the opportunities to. So we like to give them those chances through our programming.
And then last, right now we survey at a building level, sometimes increase that. Next summer, we'd like to take those surveys and really make a consistent survey all throughout our district and have a complete look at how our program's doing and what our families, what feedback they have for us. So at this time, we'll take any questions.
Could you go back to the enrollment slide, please?
Yeah.
And this is just a question. I follow the pictures and all the posts on Facebook. Throughout the summer in the last few years, I remember one of Pete Colwell. And my question is, do the kids ever catch anything other than a carp?
Or a sturgeon. I've seen a lot of
or a
sturgeon
sturgeon.
too. Yes.
Every picture, there's a carp. I mean, they fight great, but these kids
there's
are
a nice
reeling in.
Smallmouth bass.
Okay,
This summer.
Big.
No, but every picture, it's just the ugliest fish out there, and that's what these kids are bringing in.
Okay, so if I take one thing from this,
Yeah.
okay, more pictures of different fish.
Yeah, like a sunfish, anything, but this,
I don't usually guarantee, but
I've noticed,
I can guarantee.
there's a picture of Colwell out there somewhere holding a really big one, a
I think
sturgeon.
that was a sturgeon.
Yeah.
Truly, we digress.
That's been on my mind a few years, everyone.
I have a question that's not nearly as important as that. Were you able to see from, I know you said that you believe that a big drop or big reason for the drop in the elementary numbers was because of John Muir. So were you able to see that it was specifically those students and not because we compressed the number of schools where it was offered? Because I would
No.
think that reducing the number of schools where it was offered might impact it as well.
It was over 100 at John Muir. So
Okay.
I looked at that. We have not gone in too much into, we couldn't be at Jefferson this summer, so we had to move to Stettin, and we've been at Jefferson for a while. My guess, without looking at the exact numbers, we probably did see a decrease in students from the Jefferson homeschool. But then with it going to Stettin, my guess is we saw an increase in Stettin. We'll have to take some time to look at those numbers. It was just really noticeable right off the bat. John Muir's program was basically cut in half, which was exactly pretty much what we saw.
And I would like to share too that going down to 3 schools, I opened up 60 more spots for elementary students in summer G2M. And we did have higher enrollment, I think, compared to last summer for that specific program.
And was the move from Jefferson to Stettin impacted by the fact that there was construction taking place at Jefferson?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Is there a plan to switch back to Jefferson then?
There's some road work being done at Jefferson next summer, so that's one we have to work on. That's where we start planning in September, start having those conversations and have those decisions made with buildings and grounds and others by hopefully December.
There's a lot of students within walking distance of Jefferson. It's sort of a nice location.
Yes.
Okay.
So do we need to order a lot more hard hats?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we do to get that going.
Construction.
I did want to make a serious comment. I do like the idea that the high school numbers are starting to go down because of the fact that there's less credit recovery needed, and that is a good point, that the schools are taking care of things throughout the year versus having this balloon all the time.
Agreed.
So, good point. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you for that, and a great opportunity to see what happened during the summer. Ad hoc committee meeting, that is, we keep on moving here. Well, we're at agenda item 9 already. Board member professional growth and development report. Does anyone have anything to report? You will in a second.
No.
Or do you have something right now? Okay.
Under this, I was invited by Rob Hughes to come and speak over at Wausau East to his social studies class of those students, and we talked about why to be on the board and how campaigns worked and how government works in general, and we talked a bit about consolidating schools or not if we had one high school, and to see what those students thought. So it was a great half hour to spend with the kids, and just to be able to engage with them, and I think Rob found it helpful. He sent me a nice thank you card, and I enjoyed doing that with them.
It's good to be able to connect with students like that. Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else? If not, Corey, you want to continue with legislative liaison information?
So the only other thing I would have is that August 5th, we had the CISA 9 meeting. I handed out the annual report that was just a couple weeks old, hot off the presses, to the rest of the board, and then there's copies for the administrators. And we had our annual meeting, did a reorganization. We have a new member on the Board of Control that replaced Andy Mary from Antigo. That it's still a new board member from Antigo that took Andy's place. Otherwise, it's the same people. And they mentioned that CISA 9 was going to be helping out Wausau on the Wednesday, August 28th, doing some training of our staff. They were coming down on the professional development day before classes start for us this year. So that's all I have at this time.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Bushman, do you have anything to add?
Just a few comments. A great time of the year. Our buildings are starting to fill up. So we had a professional development with our administrative team last Thursday. Our directors did a phenomenal job providing and working with them. So that's exciting. Starting this upcoming Monday, we've got our brand new teachers in the district will be coming in for their orientation and planning. So that's really exciting to see their fresh faces. The week after that, we'll have our veteran teachers coming back into the district. So things are starting to heat up, and you can feel the pressure when you walk around. So that's really cool. And then final comment is Timber, our K-9 officer, is now walking around Wausau East. So Timber's in the building and working with their staff. So that should be exciting.
Timber is in the building. Cool. Appreciate that. I do want to add one other comment. During the summer, earlier in June, Wisconsin Association of School Boards had the Summer Learning Symposium, and Sarah and I went over in Green Bay, and it was very informational. There's a lot of good things coming up and going out, and kept us abreast of what's going on. So things are happening. It's a good time to get caught up and get a little bit more knowledge, and that's very important. So with that, I'd like to put our member liaison district activity report into play here, if you could do that. And with that, I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome back.